This guy's a traitor, a treasonist, and he has broken every law of the United States. And I'm not for the death penalty, so if I'm not for the death penalty, I only want to do it, illegally shoot the son of a...
Date, 2017. Target, Julian Asange, the founder of WikiLeaks. Location, the Ecuadorian Embassy in London. Objective, killer capture. Origins of this order, from, quote, the highest levels, end quote, of the U.S. government and CIA.
Julian Asange, founder of WikiLeaks, to be arrested in London. London police.
Normally, a target like Asange would be easy. Grab him from his way home from work, or shoot him as he walks to get his morning coffee. The only problem was Asange did none of these things. He hadn't done any of those things in years. For 5 years, Julian Asange had been hiding in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. Killing him there or sending in the police would go against international law and be a foreign relations disaster, so the CIA had to concoct another plan. First, they discussed secretly kidnapping him from the embassy and bringing him back to America. But that would make it too obvious America broke the law, so they changed tactics. Kidnap him, turn him over to the British, that way no one would know who was behind it then, right? But then there was still the chance he wouldn't get extradited back to the US if the British police got him. Eventually, they got so desperate that they had no choice. They discussed the unthinkable.
Did the CIA plot and plan to kill Julian Assange?
Well, unthinkable for everyone else, very thinkable for the CIA. Going against every international law, they contemplated assassinating Julian Asange in the embassy where he lived. Poison, snipers, sending in assassins, nothing was off the table. Quote, it got to the point where every human being in a 3-block radius of the embassy in London was working for one of the intelligence services, whether they were street sweepers, or police officers, or security guards, end quote. It turns out that UC Global, the company the embassy paid to keep Asange safe, had been spying on him for US intelligence all along. The same company the embassy paid more than $5 million to over the last 7 years. WikiLeaks changed the game. When it launched in 2006, it was like nothing the world had ever seen before. Anyone with any important information or proof of classified secrets could submit their data to WikiLeaks anonymously, something that was not very common back then. What made WikiLeaks different from other whistleblower organizations is that they could never really be charged with stealing information. They didn't do any of the hacking themselves, so to a certain extent, they were innocent, which led to one other major advantage WikiLeaks had. Since they weren't involved in stealing the information, the classified documents they published could be used in court. This was a game changer and terrifying for powerful people with dark secrets to hide. In April 2010, WikiLeaks releases this video. It's a simple, low-quality video from an Apache helicopter involved in a Baghdad airstrike on July 12, 2007. This video was an airstrike that killed 18 people. Pretty standard stuff for the US military. What was strange, however, was that for a group of armed insurgents, they seemed to be walking around rather calmly, while a loud, heavily armed, unmistakably Western Apache helicopter was roaming above. But rest assured, the US military promised us that, quote, there is no question that coalition forces were clearly engaged in combat operations against a hostile force.
Move along, there's nothing to see here!
These were not enemy insurgents hostile forces that the US military shot up, but 2 unarmed photographers for the news agency Reuters, Namir Noor Eldin and his driver Sahid Chama. The pilots mistook their cameras for weapons, and a myriad of other casualties that didn't have any weapons or seemed to be hostile at all. The US military just tried to cover up friendly fire on journalists, and almost instantly, the video was spread to every newspaper and online publication around the world.
Of course, our top story this morning, the White House blasting the release of over 90,000 U.S. military records on the war in Afghanistan.
On August 16, 2012, the foreign minister of Ecuador announced that Julian Asange had been given asylum at the Ecuadorian embassy in London.
We trust that the United Kingdom will offer as soon as possible the guarantee for the safe passage for this asylum of Mr. Assange, and that they will respect those international agreements that they have signed in the past and that they have always respected.
A tiny office in the embassy was converted into a studio, with a bed, shower, treadmill, kitchenette, and computer. If he had guests, they'd visit him in his little studio. His lawyers, therapists, and even a personal trainer had to make do with the small space. If he ever stepped foot outside the embassy, British police officers were front and center, ready to arrest him on the spot for skipping bail. And he would stay trapped in that embassy for 5 years before WikiLeaks released their most damaging data dump yet, all at the cost of the US government's dignity. Julian Assange was a target for the US government under both President Obama and President Trump. He embarrassed the military, showed them how weak their security was, and on March 7, 2017, he released what they called Vault 7. Arguably the most embarrassing data leak in the history of the CIA and the US government. What was in Vault 7? All the internal documentation regarding the CIA's ultra-secret hacking division and its tactics. The guys who were supposed to be the best hackers in the world had apparently been hacked. This breach was not just embarrassing, it took away years of agency pride and dignity. The organization tasked with keeping America's secrets couldn't even stop a leak of their most classified information. Vault 7 had it all. Details on electronic surveillance equipment, cyber warfare weapons, and how they could break into almost every cell phone operating system on the planet. All out in the open for the world to see. Agency officials used to, quote, laugh about WikiLeaks, end quote, mocking the State Department and the Pentagon for allowing so much material to escape their control. But now, it was their turn. And for the CIA, revenge wasn't even a question, it was the only answer. Their blood was boiling and all they could see was red. An example had to be made, and the main targets? Of course, it was Julian Assange.
WikiLeaks walks like a hostile intelligence service and talks like a hostile intelligence service.
This new classification was bureaucratic speak that now justified the use of offensive measures against this non-state hostile intelligence service. The fight was on, and according to Mike Pompeo, there were no rules. After his speech, he gave CIA officers the order to figure out the, quote, art of the possible, end quote. He said, quote, nothing's off limits. Don't self-censor yourself. I need operational ideas from you. I'll worry about the lawyers in Washington, end quote. On April 2, 2019, President Lenin Moreno announced Assange was no longer welcome at the embassy. Assange had very little time to prepare when 9 days later, the Ecuadorian government invited British police into the embassy to arrest Assange on the basis of skipping bail. That very same day, Assange was found guilty and sentenced 50 weeks in prison starting May 1st. The US's time had come. Assange had been secretly indicted over a year earlier in March 2018, and on the same day he was arrested in London, the indictment was unsealed. He was charged with conspiracy to commit computer intrusion. A month later, while serving his sentence in the Belmarsh prison, the US added 17 charges to the list. The maximum sentence? 170 years in prison. 170 years for the leader of an organization that wasn't all that different from other news agencies that published leaks. At his extradition hearing in May 2019, Assange said, quote, I do not wish to surrender myself for extradition for doing journalism that has won many, many awards and protected many people. End quote. Julian Assange is currently still in Belmarsh prison at the time of recording this video. If he's extradited, he faces solitary confinement in a supermax prison, 170 years in prison for someone who did the same job as most journalists out there. Where I wouldn't be surprised if he met the same fate as our friend whose first name starts with a J and last name starts with an E. Time will tell what the future holds for the whistleblower pioneer.